All right, music fans, welcome back. Harmless Dave here on the Harmless Dave channel, talking about real music and doing it in real time for a few real people out here, just like you and just like me. All right, going to talk about a reunion between Mick Fleetwood and Lindsey Buckingham. Yup, getting close to Fleetwood Mac, folks. I'm going to keep plugging it for Fleetwood Mac. Now, before we get to that story, the speaker wars. You need to know about the speaker wars if you haven't heard them yet. Um, they've got two songs out. One called "It Ain't Easy," and this one here, "You Make Every Lie Come True," featuring the great Stan Lynch on drums. Does this sound like the Heartbreakers? Yup, sure does. Should this be on classic rock stations right now? Yup, sure should be, but we don't have any sort of radio business here in the United States. It's a joke. Someone with deep pockets needs to come along and fix it. You know, like Elon buying Twitter. Somebody needs to come along and say, you know what? Capitol Records, you suck. All right. The rock and roll world for the last 30 plus years has been a joke. I still don't want to hear Jeremy on the radio. I still don't want to hear it. The first time I heard it, I didn't like it. I was still working in rock and roll, mainstream rock station at that time. And I'm like, really? We're going to play this next to the Rolling Stones? Okay. And I know it's got billions of views. You go look at all that stuff and they're breaking records. And I'm just like, it's an acquired taste, right? It's like the bitter aftertaste. It's like stevia, right? If you've had Splenda and then you have stevia, you're just like, okay, what's up with that taste at the end? All right. There's no sweetness. There's no R&B. There's no blues. It's just, anger, doom, destruction. I've got to be careful. I've got a patron who says, hey, Dave, don't get too descriptive with how you feel about that kind of music. Well, all I can tell you is that music soured me on rock and roll. And I started listening to country in the 90s, and I really had a good time listening to country, and I'm glad I did. So the big breaking news story, though, Mick and Lindsey, not Stevie and Lindsey, unfortunately, but Mick and Lindsey are back together again. Mick Fleetwood, the producer of Mick Fleetwood's new record, has been putting out, I guess, some threads somewhere about the two of them in the studio listening to the music that he's been making with Mick Fleetwood. And so Lindsey Buckingham apparently is going to play some guitar on this, or already has. The producer posted more images, including one captioned, "Mick and Lindsey together again. What a flawless guitar player." Wow. Of course, we're talking about Lindsey Buckingham, right? So it seems Fleetwood Buckingham record of some description is in the works. If so, it would be the first time that the two have worked together since 2018. Back then, it was the Buckingham McVie album, which should have been a Fleetwood Mac album, but it wasn't because Stevie Nicks didn't want to participate and apparently didn't have any material to contribute to the album. Buckingham, of course, was booted from Fleetwood Mac, which was a criminal act as far as I'm concerned. But apparently, people, like I said, people showed up for that tour. The casual fans, they didn't know who Neil Finn was. They didn't care about Mike Campbell. They showed up to see what was Fleetwood Mac at that time. And at least we had a last go round for the late, great Christine McVie. That's the best thing about that tour. But that Buckingham McVie album is fantastic, and people should go back and listen to it. So there could be a Fleetwood Mac reunion, but it says here the issues really revolve around Buckingham and Stevie Nicks rather than the band as a whole. Now, again, people will post comments and they'll say there can be no Fleetwood Mac without Christine McVie. Problem, and I kind of agree with that to some extent. The problem is, though, if you're going to say that, you've got to remember that Christine had left the band for like 15 years or something. She had retired, and then she came out of retirement, which was really cool. But there was a Fleetwood Mac before Stevie Nicks. There was a Fleetwood Mac that existed without Christine McVie, obviously a better band with Christine McVie. But at this point, if you're going to have Fleetwood Mac with Mike Campbell and Neil Finn, you could have a Fleetwood Mac without Christine McVie. If you bring Lindsey and Stevie back together, and no word about how John McVie is or where he is, certainly it would be good if he were a part of anything the band was to do in the future. So anyway, we know that Stevie Nicks apparently just can't stand to be in the same room with Lindsey Buckingham. But here's what, and I've already reported on this, here's what Mick Fleetwood had to say recently. I always have a fantasy that Stevie and Lindsey would pal up a bit more and just say everything's okay for them both. He told that to Us Weekly last month. I miss playing as much as we used to. I'm hoping next year, one way or another, some band somewhere will say, come and play drums or something. Some band somewhere. How about Fleetwood Mac? So I always love to do whatever. I can do working on an album, or I can tour on that album. I don't know. But not Fleetwood Mac, he says. So at the end, he's kind of like negative toward the idea of this being Fleetwood Mac. But it can't be Fleetwood Mac with just Lindsey and Mick, although the way I look at this, especially if you brought John in, you'd have 3/5 of Fleetwood Mac. You know, and that's better than 2/5, right? And it would bring a little more legitimacy to it. But I think, again, the deciding factor would be Stevie Nicks. And she's out there with Billy Joel. She's out there doing big stadiums, and she can't stand Lindsey Buckingham. All right. And it's kind of sad. It's kind of sad because I bet you this material is going to be pretty decent. And you've got Lindsey playing guitar. There's going to be a lot of interest on this. But I have to understand a lot of the things that I like and that I talk about, the majority of casual fans are the opposite. Like the Speaker Wars, what's that? I'm just going to go listen to Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. Oh, okay. You know, it's a really good band. You should check it out. Yeah, I don't really care anymore. And the same goes for this. Oh, new material by Mick Fleetwood. The name rings a bell. But it's not Fleetwood Mac, and it's not old, so I don't really care. And this is the radio industry, what it did in this new way to consume music. What it's done is it's frozen everything. It froze all that old music where it is, because you can still turn on radio stations and hear all the old stuff. And you're thinking, well, that's it. Nothing really happened in the 90s or after that. And so I'll just listen to this stuff over here. And I'll keep hearing it over and over again. And that's all I need. And I understand that to some degree. But I don't know. I mean, people get bored with things pretty quickly. You would think they would want something new, and you could mix it in. Like I said, you could put this Mick Fleetwood. I mean, I don't know who's going to sing. Is Lindsey going to sing on this? I mean, that'll be cool if he decides to sing, but we shall find out. I'll put a link in the description to this project so you can check it out. And also the Speaker Wars, which you can check out more immediately. You can listen to that and maybe even pre-order a copy of the album. That would be pretty cool. But bottom line here, folks, is it's one person pretty much holding up a reunion. And as time goes on, the more it appears that Mick Fleetwood wants back in on something. And it's probably not just some random band. He's hinting around that he wants to work and he wants to get out there on the road. And good for him, right? He's not a spring chicken, but yet he wants to spring into action. So we'll see. I don't know. I've been monitoring this, and it appears that everybody's on board except old Stevie Nicks.